previous tutorial, okay, we were talking about a few things that comes into a play of us making a file and then writing to the file and reading to the file, all these correct operations. And today is going to be a bit different. Okay, so let's get started. So this is the tutorial tree. I mean, in this case, the beginner track, yeah, for Python. So in this case, I'll be teaching you guys, or a quick recap itself, since I've showed you in the code just now here, which is inside this folder, which we did on the previous class, which we had some introduction about unpacking them. Okay, this, when you see one asterisk, that means it's an arc. But if you see two asterisks, it means quarks. Okay, so in this case, a quick recap. So we talked about file system, and we also talked about reading and writing data to JSON file. Okay, and that can also work across TXTs, but then they have different ways of implementing things. Yeah. So in this case, let's get started on that way. Okay. So today we're gonna be talking, or be learning about a few things. So first one will be learning about functions instead of function. Okay, this is quite handy, yeah, if you're using wrappers and all these things. Okay, whereby we will go into wrappers more in depth once we have passed through the beginner track of this Python tutorial. Okay, so today we'll be learning mostly about loops, yeah, Python's for loop and Python for loop with enumerator, yeah. So in this case, so we will have enumerators where we can get indexes and all these things, and finally maybe a short quiz, but then that depends also. Okay, but short quiz will be quite simple. Yeah, I'll be telling you guys verbally. Okay, let's get started. Okay, now for the slides, let me make a new folder. I'm going to call it as beginner 2. Okay, since this is the files containing here is a part of the beginner, I mean the second class of the beginner series, yeah, in this case. So I'm going to make a new one called beginner tree. Okay, so inside beginner tree, I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to just call it as run.py. Okay, so our current run.py is empty. Yeah, I'm just going to close this side panel in this case. So let's go back to what we learned today. So first one is Python for loops. Okay, so in this case, to start with Python's for loop, we have to learn about a few things about for loops. So for loops, you guys might have done in different languages. I've seen in PHP is for each something, and then there it goes. Okay, and each languages have different way of showing you how for loops work. Okay, but in Python, it's a bit straightforward, but at the same place, it can be a bit challenging to understand. I mean, it will not be that challenging, but it'll maybe be challenging. Okay, so in this case, let me make a new data set. I mean, let me make a new array. I'm going to call it as data. Okay, remember, whenever you have a underscore in front of a variable, which means that you're declaring a private variable. Okay, but if you do not have an underscore in front, which means it's a public variable. Therefore, you see the color changes within VS Code. Okay, this is done by Pylance. All right, first things foremost, let me make a new data set. I'm going to call it as my name first, and the second one I'm going to call it Celestial. Okay, Celestial. So in this case, for me to demonstrate you guys about how for loops work, okay, this tutorial is going to be, I mean, this tutorial is going to be more simple. I mean, it's going to be quite simple, yeah, and it's going to be, in this case, it will not take that much of time, but then it requires a lot of comprehension, you know. So I mean, yeah, as people say, communication. I mean, comprehension is important in communication. Okay, so in this case, comprehension is needed. Yeah, in this case, I mean, I don't need you guys to communicate because obviously I can hear you guys through YouTube. Okay, so in this case, for, all right, let's say for d in data, I'm gonna call it as names, maybe names. Okay, for name in names. Okay, and then do a print. Okay, print name. Okay, so what it does is it's going to iterate me through the names array list here. Okay, this is a list which is also called as an array in different languages. Okay, and it's going to loop through each and every name inside the list here, and it's going to print me out. It's quite simple, yeah. So let's try to run this. Okay, so I'm going to go to that folder beginner 3. Okay, so I'm going to do Python 3 run.py, and now you see that we have my name and Celestial. Okay, which means we have two of this I mean, both of this values being printed out. Okay, and we can also change this a little bit. So in this case, if I do a list here, I'm going to call it name. Okay, and my name. Okay, And second of all, okay, let me remove the extra space. I mean, why not? Okay, and I'm gonna take that and put it here, and I'm going to at the same. Sorry, I apologize for that. And I'm gonna type in celestial. Okay, and I'm going to print them out. And now we see JSON here, in this case a dict. Okay, so we have my name and celestial. And to actually verify if this is actually a JSON or dict, okay, so in this case we can do something called type, which we looked into the previous tutorial here. If you have followed me in the previous tutorial, we were looking into what type means as we're trying to figure out a way on how to write things to the files. Okay, so if I do a type, so as you see, this is my name. Okay, this is coming out as a dictionary, data dictionary, whereby the type of data dictionary is actually a dict, which means that it is actually a valid JSON. All right, so, and if it is a valid JSON, I can also do things like get, okay, which gets the element from the dictionary. And if I do a run here, and I see that I have my name coming out, okay, name, both of these names are out. And I mean, obviously our type here in this case, okay, is referring to the entire dictionary. But if I were to do a get, okay, and name, that should return me str, string in this case. So my name is a string and celestial is also a string. And at the same point, if at the same time, if I do another one, name, okay, and one is not a string here. In this case, it is an integer, okay, int. So if I do a run again, and it now says that the one that I specified here is actually an integer, whereby celestial and my own name is under str string. Okay, I'm not going to clear this to the terminal. Okay, so now this is actually how for loops work. And for loops can actually have as much as possible. You guys can have as many names as you want or as many data as you want. But always remember that if you are trying to iterate to 1 million 1 million words, it's going to be a bit challenging because 1 million words is going to increase your space complexity and time complexity. I think it's just time complexity, yeah. So it's going to increase your time complexity. So in this case, if you have 1 million iterations or 1 million records, which means the program is going to iterate 1 million times, which is not that, I won't call it as that optimized, but then at the same time, you guys have to remember that this is actually increasing the time complexity. Time complexity also comes in layman terms of how long does your application take or how many times your application loops before it finishes up the entire list here. Okay, so if you're trying to have like finding names within the loops and all these things, okay, I think it's really important for you to know how complexity works. Okay, this is all data structures here, basics of computer science. Okay, so I'm going to remove this one. Okay, and then I'm going to remove this for now. So let's say if I were to filter out, okay, I'm going to say filter out celestial. Okay, the default way of you doing is for name in names. Okay, if name blah blah blah, then that means you got it. Okay, and another way you can do it is you can redeclare back the same variable. Okay, you redeclare back the same variable. So in this case, all you do is name, just pass that in for name in names. Okay, if name dot get name equals to celestial. Okay, and if I want to print this out, print it should be names actually, uh names. Okay, and I'm going to copy the same variable name, I'm going to put it there, names. Okay, which means I can reuse back the same variable name, and I can also look through them as well at the same time. So in this case, if I were to print it out, okay, this means that it already got me the name celestial, and it took some time. So let's do a time. Okay, Python 3 run py, and it took around, we can see around 8 milliseconds, yeah, for it to execute and all these things. Okay, and just ignore this fish because the fish is actually my terminal's extension. So look for external, and we came to a point of 8 milliseconds to execute that, and that might decrease or increase depending on what the CPU is doing at the moment. Okay, and I have a lot of applications running, so in this case, that's exactly why. Okay, so yeah, that is how you use for loop to do a lot of things. Okay, and you can actually have multiple conditions. If let's say name, okay, celestial, or okay, or we can have our or here, okay, or all right, and then let's say a name called Raven as well, okay. And if I were to run this, I get both of these names, my name and celestial. And if I were to change something here, I will not see my name included. Yeah. So that is how you actually do something fast, okay? So in Python, there are a lot of ways for you to do things. Okay, this is one of the way for you to reuse back the same variable so that you don't waste that kind of the precious memory that you have on your computer or server, or maybe somewhere you try to deploy it, maybe a serverless function. Okay, so in this case, this is another way for you to reuse back the same variable names and therefore iterating through them as well. Okay, so we have that. So let me quickly comment this out. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys another one, which is the Python for loop enumerator. Okay, now we were trying to iterate through each and every element here within our list. Okay, which is a dictionary, and I want to know what is the index of it. Because since I'm declaring this myself, I know this is index 0 and this is index 1. Okay, but I want it to be done programmatically. So as I keep on adding things, I don't have to keep on remembering how much, I mean, how many variables or how many indexes that I have within my list. Okay, but if you're trying to do a len means getting the list of the, the count of the elements within an array. For do a len, it says that I have two, okay, which means I have two data inside of this. But then if you look into data structure or even how arrays actually work, they actually start from array index 0. Although some languages maybe start from 1, but then most of them start from array index 0. Okay, so we are going to make use of that. So how we do is for, okay, first things foremost, let's do something first. Name in, okay, enumerate. If I spell it wrong, okay, enumerate, okay. And if I do a names here, and which means if I do a print now, okay, what it's going to give me is, I mean, I'm going to give you guys a guess here because obviously I cannot ask you guys questions one to one, but then I'm going to give you guys a guess. So will it return me the data or an error? Okay, so for us to properly understand how, let's say for us to properly understand how enumerators work, okay, let's have a look at how it's declared. Maybe let's see for let's look at double tree schools. Okay, so in this case, within a double tree schools, it says that we have it's a tuple as well. In this case, on their example, it's a tuple, and you can also use it for tuples. Okay, and remember that whenever we have an enumerator here, we have an iterable to be passed through, which in our code, in our code is this name. Okay, the names variable, which is a list. Whenever you see a list or whenever you see a tuple, they can be iterated. They are an iterable element. Okay, so in this case we have an iterable, and therefore we can also set a start. Okay, so in this case, if you set a start, let's say I want the iteration to be starting from array index 1. So all I have to do is I do a comma and I add a 1, and therefore it will start from anything after array index 1. I mean, array index 1 is also included, but then anything after array index 1 or the same number as array index 1. Okay, which means basically, okay, what it means is anything after, okay, which means it's going to be that, okay, 1. All right, so in this case, we look into Python, okay, so it's going to be array, I mean, 1 equals to 1, I mean, it's going to start from 1, okay, therefore 1 is also included. So if you have 1 million indexes within array, which means it's going to start from array index 1 and it's going to stop at 999, which because, as I told you guys, okay, arrays start from 0, index 0. Therefore, from index 0 to 1 million or 1000, it's going to be direct 1 to 1, right? So if we were try to start from array index 1, which means that it's going to be, okay, I'm going to say it's going to be 1000 if that's the maximum we have, okay, minus 1, then is equals to 999. Therefore, it's going to iterate for 999 times. Okay, so that is how iterations work. In this case, I'm not going to set any start values. Okay, and let's run this out. Okay, now we see we have things like this, a tuple coming up, okay? And if you guessed it right, okay, it's going to return me the data, but the data is in tuple, okay? So in this case, it's going to return me the tuple. In the tuple, we have two elements here, the arrays index, and we have the dictionary here, okay, in this case. So we also have the second line here, index 1, and name Celestial, which is exactly what I put in here. My name is index 0, and therefore Celestial is index 1. So index 0 and index 1. Perfect. So now we have that. So how are we going to unpack them? Okay. As you guys knew, we in the previous tutorial we were looking about that args, and we're also looking at uh, quarks. Okay. So args is an argument. Yeah, we can split out an array if an array has. Let's say example here we have an array here. If I want to take out each and every individual elements out of this, these are individual elements. Yeah, this entire dictionary. Okay, so if I want to remove each and every one of them individually, I use one asterisk in front, therefore it's called as an args. But if let's say if I use something called quarks, yeah, in this case two asterisks, which means I will be able to extract out the key value pair within my dictionary, which means it's accessing inside of the dictionary. All right, and it's usually used for you. In my case, I have only used it most of the time for dictionaries, and it works perfectly. Okay, and if you're looking into one of our previous tutorials here, which we were trying to write things to the files, we did use args. Okay, at some point we did use args. Let me see, did I see that code wrong or something? Yeah, we did use args here. Okay, but we did not use quarks. But I'm sure I have explained to you guys how quarks works. Okay, so we have used args here. So if I go back to my current code here, which is our tutorial tree, okay, so let's say if I were to extract out the first index and my dictionary here as a separate entity, not just one thing, okay. But before that, let me show you something. If I use name array index 0 and I run this, I get 0, 1, okay, which means I'm accessing the internal elements within my tuple, okay. So within my internal element here, tuples do also have, since tuple is an iterable element, therefore tuple also will have indexes within them. So array index 0 inside a tuple is the first element here, and array index 1 inside a tuple is my dictionary here. Okay, so that is how it works, and therefore this is the response, or this is the way how it shows up. Okay, in the end. All right. So in this case, for us to seamlessly, for us to actually do it professionally, okay, unpacking things comes here. Okay. So in this case, if we have index, okay, in front of here, which means I can now individually pull out my dictionaries, which means I have already detached my first element of my tuple and my second, element 0, index 0 of my tuple, and my index 1 element, or index 1 element from my tuple as well, which is my dictionary here, index 1, and my index 0 is an integer which returns me the index of the array. Okay, don't get confused here. Okay, remember that list also have indexes. Therefore, in this case, we are trying to get the indexes of the list. But if you do not unpack it some like this, you will get the indexes, or you will get the response in a tuple, whereby a tuple also do have indexes within them. Okay, so in this case, since we have detached it, why don't we do something fun now? So index, okay, and therefore if I were to run this now, okay, now it says now we have detached them completely. Therefore my array index, or my index 0 of my tuple is basically my index of my array index. So in this case is 0, is detached, and the next one would be my dictionary, which is my tuple's first element, or first array element. Okay, so that is how it is. To make it look nicer, we can also wrap it with brackets, and it will work totally fine. Okay, and there you go, it worked totally fine. So which means now we have individually detached both of them. This is also called as unpacking within Python. Okay, and remember that enumerate returns you, okay, two values, and it depends actually most of the time as well. if my index here, okay, if I were to have a lot of different things, okay, I can also check out things, okay. So in this case, if let's say we know that my name here, okay, this basically is a dictionary, okay, which means I'll be able to use, okay, quarks, key value args. So if I use that, okay, so in this case, key value args name, and I'll still see the same value. Why? Because whenever we see key value args, key value args, it will detach out elements from your list. If your list has name, that, and then age, that, okay, which means if you have a key value pair args, okay, it will basically detach out name equals to that and age equals to that, and each of them will be individual. Yeah, they will not be a part of the same dictionary, therefore it will be easy for Python to parse it out. Okay, so in this case, if I just run it again, I am now able to pull it out individually, but then it will still look the same within my terminal console terminal, I mean a terminal output. Yeah, so we can use that way. Okay, there's a lot of ways that you can use. All right, and you can also use something called get operator, which we did just now. Okay, so in this case, name dot get, get me the name. Okay, and I can see index 0 is my name and index 1 is Celestial. Okay, so in this case we have already got that, and we can have as many. Okay, let's say I'm going to repaste that again. I want to keep the same name, yeah. So I want to paste it a lot of times, multiple times actually. Okay, and yeah, and now let's say I forgot what is this index and I'm lazy to find it out or count it myself. Okay, and I'm gonna run this here, and it says here from index 0, you start from there, and index 9. Okay, which means I do have around 9 to 10 elements within my code here. Okay, in this case, yeah. So which means I have 9 elements, thereby is basically because 13 minus 4 is actually 9. Okay, so in this case, so how it works out is that it goes by array index 0 and then lastly goes to array index 9. Okay, and it will keep on increasing as much as you need. And if you see here, the time actually increased. If 12 milliseconds now, whereby all the time, all the way we were trying to fix a lot of things, right? We were adding all these funny things, key value arguments, list inputs and outputs, and all these things, unpacking all of them. They did not increase any noticeable time constraint or any noticeable time increase. Okay, they did not come to all of that. But when we increased our list input, yeah, the data we have inside of list, we do now have some extra seconds or extra milliseconds, which all mean milliseconds may be small, but if you look into how codes execute, depending on CPU and all these things, it's going to be quite challenging for you to actually, to actually look for a lot of things. Yeah, so in this case, so for you to actually implement it in a proper way, okay, it's better for you to keep your list as small as possible. Okay, if you want more time and all these things, you can architect your way to hash using hash map, binary tree search, all these ways within data science or algorithms. Okay, you can use all of that, but then at the same point, if you want to keep on using a list, okay, you can still do that as well. Okay, but then just be mindful of your inputs within the list, because if your list has a lot of data, it can increase the amount of time execution can take. And if you're using a serverless platform like Google Cloud Functions, maybe AWS Lambda, or any serverless application hosting platform, okay. So in this case, if you're trying to use something like that, remember that you are charged based on per millisecond basis. Okay, so in this case, it will increase your cost. Although, yeah, it depends on how optimized your code is at the first place. Okay, because a lot of people are looking for optimized code. Okay, so this is one of the best ways or one of the pro tips I can give you from all my experience. Okay, so yeah, and I've been within this industry for more than 3 to 4 years into cloud and making APIs and all these things. So just take my word, make sure that your list or the size of your array is kept to a minimal. I know you cannot avoid all the time. But then if you are given a chance to avoid it, please avoid it at all costs. Okay, and yeah, so which means that now we have completed our part three or our tutorial three of a Python for beginners. So in this case, so let me give you a quiz. Okay, since I said I'm going to say you guys verbally, okay, the quiz is why don't you guys make an array? Okay, in an array, you guys can have as many elements as you want, okay, as many elements as you want. But then instead of using all these functionalities that I showed here, why don't you guys try to for loop through it? Okay, for loop or mean for name in names and just print it out. Why didn't you guys try that? And if you guys have time installed on a machine, if you guys using a Linux terminal in this case, maybe a Mac OS terminal or maybe a Linux based terminal, you guys will have time installed by default. And Windows, I'm not sure, maybe you will have time installed if using Git Bash, but PowerShell or command prompt, maybe probably not. Okay, so in this case, yeah, you guys can try it out. Okay, why don't you guys just let me know in the comment section below. Okay, so yeah, I'll keep on making more videos, and we are nearly, I mean, we do have a few more sessions before we go to the intermediate level of Python for beginners. Okay, and when you go to the intermediate level, there's going to be a bit more fun and challenging as you'll be building a lot of different things. Okay, so yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and peace out.